Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Perspective. We'll be talking about the recent remarks. We've also seen the Chief Justice of Pakistan urge political parties towards dialogue. Dialogue, of course, has been something which has been on the agenda for a while. There's been a lot of talk about moving towards dialogue. Of course, political parties existing in a kind of a working environment that is integral to parliamentary democracy, like a functioning parliamentary democracy that would be ideal for a country like Pakistan. We'll be talking about the ramifications of these latest comments that have come in from the superior judiciary, and also a little perhaps thawing or a change in attitude that is it just rumors, or are we really going to be looking at that kind of change come from that political party, primarily the opposition, which has been something that has been again talked about for a long time. A little later on, we'll also be talking about the Prime Minister's visit to China and its ramifications, what's on the agenda, the key highlights, all of that today on Perspective. I have with me today Barrister Talha, who's a legal expert. Thank you for being with us today. We also have Daniyal Sheikh, who's a political analyst. Thank you for joining us today. And we also have Aniq Zafar, who's a political analyst. Thank you for being with us today. A little later on, we will be joined by other guests. Barrister Talha, how do you look at these comments, first of all, from a legal perspective? Of course, on the one hand, there are certain cases right now being adjudicated in, the superior courts, which necessarily have political ramifications. Do you think that these comments are, highlighting the need for a political solution?
I think that's at the foremost. What we need to do is look at the context in which they were said in, basically. The context was that basically there is a legal case going on the NAB ordinance that was passed a few years ago. And essentially the PTI chief is the basic complainant in this case, you could say, the petitioner in this case. There were two main comments that were made. Firstly, in response to a suggestion that the Supreme Court judiciary or the judges should appoint the NAB chairman, and the second comment, which was to Senator Farooq Naik and to PTI's Faisal Javed to sit together and resolve the issues. I think the second one is a little bit more important in this context. Firstly, I think this is a good suggestion. I think legislative issues need to be sorted out in Parliament. This is not the domain of the court to discuss or to resolve the fights of politicians, because nowhere in the world else do we see this happening. This is something that only happens in Pakistan, where 90% of all our political and legislative issues end up into the Supreme Court. And so I think this culture of bringing everything to court, every political issue to court, is something that needs to stop. And that's primarily because all institutions in Pakistan are respectable. And when we do this, when we politicize institutions, whether that be the judiciary or NAB or the FIA or the army, what we do is we bring all of them into disrepute. So I think this suggestion is something that was necessary, but in order to mechanize this suggestion, what is important is that the Parliament, which the Honorable Chief Justice is referring to, is an inclusive Parliament which has all the stakeholders involved. And so I think that what this would essentially entail is primarily, let's say, have an all parties conference, right, where all of the political stakeholders are involved, where they can give their opinion, and when they can sign maybe new future charters of democracy.
Daniyal, if you've heard what Barrister Talha is saying, of course, what he's saying makes sense. But when we talk about the opposition, primarily the PTI as a political party, and for them to engage in dialogue, there has been a to and fro, there's one step forward and two step back kind of situation.
And that too, and before going to that, I think one of the reasons why the Supreme Court felt the need to give these comments was that there's a lot of mudslinging by one of the political parties. Whenever, even like after the election, when they lost, they went around creating a ruckus and saying that there was rigging, and instead of following the legal course, and then when they come to the legal course, they don't have any evidence to back their cases, and then they again go into the streets and start maligning the state institutions. So I think it's basically the purpose of this comment was that the Supreme Court which is impartial, and it's not interested to get involved in any kind of politics. But whenever a law is broken by anyone, be it the incumbent Prime Minister or the ex-Prime Minister or anyone for that matter, so ultimately the case has to go to the court. So if we look at it in this way, that the court is not interested in dealing with the cases of politicians, so that's obviously, I don't think that's what they meant, or that's not even possible. As far as the stance of PTI is concerned, right from their start, they've never stood their ground. They're famous for their U-turn, so that's something that's very much understandable that they're still doing.
No, but let me go to Aniq Sahab. Aniq Sahab, but you know, saying on the one hand that there should be a political solution is one thing. The court urging for a political solution is also, you know, of course, quite. They're not saying anything except saying that, well, you know, it would be better. Don't come to us with political questions. We don't want to adjudicate on political questions, which is, you know, fair enough. Because then again, it comes to, you know, the ball lands in their court. But the question is the practicality of the suggestion.
Oh, of course, coming back to the point of whether the courts should be advising such a dialogue or should be part of such a dialogue or not, that is, I think, very clear that all of us sitting here wouldn't like that to be the case, because political and constitutional matters should primarily be discussed, debated, argued about in the parliament, amongst the political parties, and then whatever the solution or outcome is should be acceptable to everyone. Obviously, in Pakistan's given context, it is not possible that every stakeholder would agree. There cannot be a total consensus on anything, but there should be a larger consensus on a few things, and then things should move forward. Coming back to the context that whether it is possible or not, well, I have had the opportunity of reviewing different developments since April 2022. And pre-election and post-election, we have seen that there have been attempts at reaching out to that political party we all are talking about, but somehow or the other, the appetite for having a constructive dialogue is not there with that party. One of the fundamental reasons for that is that party relies a lot on social media narrative building and uses the social media. I'm borrowing a term from one of my friends, that they only know how to use social media as a hammer. So they take out the hammer and start their social media campaigns, whatever the situation is, without looking at the consequences. So currently, if they have had any inclination of dialogue or entering into negotiations with different stakeholders, particularly the political parties, their social media handles, official social media handles, particularly their behavior in the last 3 or 4 days, does not give me any confidence that they will be any way moving towards a dialogue any sooner.
Talha, there's also, you know, when we talk about a dialogue, we see invariably a demand come from PTI that, you know, the PTI chairman, former chairman, or, you know, PTI chief Imran Khan Sahab should be absolved of the cases. Then, you know, of course, the question is the law has to take its course, and, you know, a political solution to Imran Khan Sahab's cases are they asking for that? How do you look at this? You know, it is a quid pro quo. What kind of an exchange are they asking for?
I think you're right when you say that the law has to take its course, and to some extent it has. There has been cases on Imran Khan, and they have contested it, and the government has equally contested them as well.
And we've also seen the results of some of them.
But I think the disadvantage that the PTI brings to this narrative of dialogue, or this demand of dialogue, is the idea that the only way that they want to engage in dialogue is through backdoor politics, and that is what we hear essentially in the news every day. The PTI wants backdoor negotiations. Backdoor negotiations took place with PTI, with any other party. I think that is why I suggested that all parties conference is something that is critically important. It's something that needs to happen. One positive, and I would just very respectfully contend with one of my colleagues on saying that there is no hope. I think that there is some hope, in the sense that in yesterday's hearing, what the PTI chief essentially said was he conceded that we should have been part of the parliament.
Okay.
We simply boycotted because we thought injustices were happening, but this is a big concession. This is sort of a directional change from PTI's politics, which essentially did not consider this parliament to be supreme or did not consider it to be worthy of their
Earlier on,
party.
we saw what happened, Daniyal, with regard to PTI's politics. Earlier on, there was the fact that we saw a huge boycott during the last tenure, when they were not part of the political process, and now they've said that they've learned from that mistake and now they are part of the political process. Do you think it's an ongoing to and fro thing? They realize that they have to be part of it, and then when they come into the system, they say that it has too many flaws, and then they step back. Is it that, in your opinion?
Oh, most certainly. Basically, their whole political narrative is playing to the galleries. And if you like in KPK, since they won, so everything, the election was fair and everything is good, and they're governing the province. But whereas in the centre, since they weren't able to secure a comfortable majority, so the parliament, the National Assembly, they don't respect in that manner. And on the other side, the perks and privileges as members of parliament they're drawing, and the Public Accounts Committee or whatever power they can draw from the system, they're willing to take it. And just one last thing I would like to say about the Supreme Court's suggestion. The way I interpret it, it's like a doctor telling a patient to adopt a healthy lifestyle, but that doesn't mean that he will not cure an ill patient or will not give medicine. So basically their suggestion was to start exercising and try living a more healthy life.
Okay.
That was the purpose.
Aniq Zafar, when we talk about the NAB law, the way that we've seen PTI react to it generally, the opposition, isn't it? Are they not doing the same thing? In the sense that when they were in government, how were they looking at NAB law then?
Well, obviously NAB law has been a controversial law since its inception. NAO 1999 has been a controversial law. There were sort of very wide-ranging powers invested in the Bureau and Bureau's head. For example, 90-day remand. It was sort of huge power in the hand of NAB officials or the NAB chairman. And then NAB chairman obviously that kind of power can also be misused. Then if if the appointment process is not transparent, then it creates another problem. Removing the NAB chairman is as difficult as removing the judges of the superior judiciary. So there are many issues with that. Then the way some of the NAB officials behaved, NAB's own performance, whether it has actually helped curb corruption in Pakistan or not, what kind of recoveries they have made, what is the cost of those recoveries. All this analysis has never been really been part of the national discourse. I think this should have been part of the national discourse long way back. Even in the government of former Prime Minister from 2019 to 2022, we had been hearing that bureaucracy does not work because they are afraid of the NAB persecution methods. And then this government, the government post April 2022 made some changes. Obviously, there were some advantages to some of the leaders of that government. But again, the question is that those cases had been in the courts for years on, and there is and this particularly this aspect of NAB law that you have to prove that you are innocent instead of the prosecution agency proving that you are guilty. So these kinds of issues were always there. Now because PTI thought that the other party.
So you think a lot of it, as far as NAB law is concerned, I'm going to include Barrister Talha in this also. Is it also, is it a lot of it is politicking, you know,
Yes.
of what suits who at what particular time,
Yeah.
and burden of proof, which Aniq Saab mentioned, is one of those issues that has always been an issue with regard to, you know, the opposition taking a certain stance, the government taking a certain stance. So when, you know, the Supreme Court points the political parties in the right direction by saying that, well, you know, come to a political solution on this. Then, you know, do you think that there's a chance again of all political parties sitting down on this and coming to some kind of a agreement on this?
I think that the hope is there, obviously, and that's something that in an ideal state should have happened. And like I said, this is something that's only possible if it is an inclusive parliament, if every other issue, such as, for example, reserved seats, such as other issues that are going on between the government and opposition in court, if those are resolved, this is something that comes after that, right?
But reserved seats is not really a political question. That's a legal question.
I understand that. What I'm trying to say is essentially that NAB is something, or a NAB law is something that all politicians need to unite on. And when there are underlying issues which divides these politicians, what we're essentially doing is simply giving space to extrajudicial forces to dictate what these politicians should do. That is why I think it's very necessary that any type of arrangement which looks like even an all parties conference, which takes all stakeholders on board, is necessary, because as Aniq Saab has said, NAB law since its inception has been controversial, and the sad and ironic part is that every party which is in opposition opposes it, but whenever they come in government, they usually make NAB laws much more stricter, which we've seen happen in the previous government as well, the PTI government as well, and to some extent even today we're seeing it happen. But I think what the credit that needs to be given to this government is at least some of the draconian laws that existed in the NAB ordinance, such as 90-day remands and the burden of proof on being on the accused, and a certain financial threshold that should exist in order for the NAB law to come into effect. Those changes were something that was very positive, and I think this government should be lauded on that. Whatever the decision of the court may be is something that is again for the history books, but this government needs to be lauded on that.
There's also, you know, Daniyal, there's also certain comments that were made in court as far as NAB Prosecutor General is concerned. There were questions on contempt of court, why there shouldn't be contempt of court, you know, NAB's report and their 10-year budget record, and there was the information that was provided. How do you look at these issues?
Basically, the way I look at NAB itself, the whole issue behind it is that it's responsible for accountability, but it's not proactive. It waits till the crime is committed and then it's going to investigate, and then it's going to. So in this situation, in an ideal situation, the government's responsibility is to keep in place certain check and balances, so the crime, white collar crime, should not be committed. Once it's committed, so you know, whenever, now for the truth to come out, it's going to take some time. And during that process, the amount of money, like Aniq Saab was saying, that is spent in the accountability in the process, sometimes it's more than the recovery. So to begin with, the government should put in place, instead of NAB, a system of check and balance in public spending, so that the crime is not even committed to begin with. So I think that would be a better scenario. And as far as the misuse is concerned, since it started during the time of military dictator, so we still see that cycle continuing. It's very unfortunate.
Aniq Saab, the issue with NAB, the issue with its, you know, it's not this government. It's like, you know, it's been recurring numerous tenures of different governments of all political parties. So questions like this, again, we go back to that, you know, all parties sitting together. Do you think there's a chance that all parties, Imran Khan Saab essentially, I think that's the important question, is going to agree to that?
Well,
you know, we also saw, in addition, let me, you know, add, as far as, you know, misinformation.
As my fellow panelist was pointing out, that usually what happens is that the government wants to protect this law because it's a convenient whip in its hands, and rarely NAB has exercised its autonomy. Usually it toes the government's line, or particularly we know from where it takes its directions. But in this case, I think there is a reverse phenomenon going on. In this case, PTI is not saying that you have hardened the law. They are saying that you have softened the law, right? Okay. So that because they think that because of that, the the prominent leaders of the ruling ruling coalition have taken advantage in the courts and have got their cases concluded. So that is at play here. Again, but as long as the fundamental question remains that why everyone wants this law to be there, there are stakeholders besides the political parties who really want this law to be there, because this is again the whip everyone uses on the opponents. Fundamentally, Pakistan's problem of corruption exists, but the kind of investment, the kind of effort we are putting in NAB, if we had put in modernizing our regular investigation agencies like FIA, or actually put in budgets for digitalization and improving transparency in government tenders and procedures and all that, we would have had I think reduced corruption much better than NAB itself, because NAB again is I'm perhaps going back to my same argument that NAB is for accountability, but is an organization which is not accountable to anyone.
But questioning, and yet questioning the utility of NAB that we are doing, that you are essentially mentioning, is something that, you know, all governments have somehow not managed to do till today. And we are here today talking again about NAB law, the utility of it, the, you know, its numerous provisions, whether they actually, you know, are achieving what they've been set out to do. And again, those questions that we're exactly standing where we were before.
I think we, as rightly pointed out by my fellow panelists, that this has to be discussed between political parties, and they must come to a consensus on a mechanism or an institution. Even if it is NAB, it has to be structured, it has to be amended in a way that it is actually working on reducing corruption, catching the corrupt practices, not being used as.
But why was it said, you know, at one time, I think I'm not wrong, and correct me if I am, as far as Imran Khan Saab's government itself is concerned, they had at one time said that it should be done away with.
Yeah.
Other political parties have from time to time agreed with that. Today, the narrative is somehow different.
As far as the narrative, you were discussing the narrative and you were asking about Imran Khan. Be it Imran Khan, Shahbaz Sharif, Maulana Fazl, any political leader, all the political leaders in Pakistan, they claim to be committed and in love with Pakistan. The fundamental love it is Pakistan. So if they're honest, the only metric of judging their honesty is going to be their patience and their ability to reconcile and work within the system.
Okay.
So basically this is a question of their integrity to their words, if they mean what they say. So your question, time will tell. Let's hope Imran Khan joins the process and he plays his role.
But the question is right now, you know, whether we like it or not, if Imran Khan doesn't join the process, won't we be asking the same questions we're asking today?
That's first of all,
because they are part of the parliament, whether we like it or not, they're part of the opposition, they are a large chunk of the opposition.
Like I said earlier, this is the claim to with the commitment of Pakistan. So if he's not, then he's going to prove that he's not truthful. We can say a lot of things, only our actions prove whether we're truthful or not. So this is a burden on all political, this is basically the whole purpose of the functioning within the parliament. The purpose behind it is after 45 years, the people are going to hold accountable their elected representatives for their conduct in the parliament. So if he does not become part of that process just because he is not the one running the show, so if he's not, then that's enough to tell the people what kind of mentality he has.
I want to also talk about this, you know, Talha, there's also propaganda that, you know, and social media again, which we earlier spoke about, and the comments that come on social media, the importance of them, the responsibility of them, and I think the Supreme Court has also recently remarked on them. And the way that, you know, we saw reports and we saw pictures of Imran Khan Saab in his cell to refute what was being said in social media. That's also a huge, you know, misinformation forms a huge chunk of the narrative of certain political parties. And do you think that's going to continue? Do you think it's going to change? How do you look at that?
I'm sorry, could you just
as far as misinformation is concerned, or
Hmm.
you know, as far as misinformation regarding certain things,
Yes.
we saw the photos of Imran Khan Sahib,
Yes,
his jail cell.
Hmm.
A lot had been said about that also.
Okay.
You know, invariably we saw, you know, the pictures being given out to refute those
Hmm.
the
Yes.
incorrect information that was being given. So where does incorrect information become incorrect information, and you know, where does it stop just being politics?
Look, I think the world of social media has essentially given a voice to everyone, and so that comes with the territory where essentially misinformation and propaganda is a part of it. What the government needs to do is essentially counter it while keeping freedom of speech and all these fundamental rights that people have, you know, basically enshrined in the constitution. We recently saw a defamation act that came in the
Yes.
Punjab Assembly. And while it does have its positive points, it is a way to regulate social media and misinformation and fake news that basically almost every country has been going through recently. I think that some of the penal provisions that are provided in it and some of the mechanisms that are provided in it essentially go against the basic principles of separation of powers. So, for example, having non-judicial members in courts. I think regulation of social media is something that is important, but it must not come at the cost of freedom of speech, and I think our government, our current government, is well aware of that. Again, this comes to the fact that
So
all
where does the
political
balance
parties-
come? That is the question, right? And how do we
Look,
balance
this is
things?
social media is again a new phenomenon. This balance is something that every
We will
country is
learn.
still
Can
searching
I add?
for.
Ji.
See, basically, like Khawaja Sahib was telling us, no, the unfortunate thing in this the world that we live in is that perceptions are larger than reality, and this is what Imran Khan has been banking on from the start. He creates a perception, and later on there's nothing. Like I said earlier, the fundamental characteristic of an honest person will be his patience. So a person who is not showing patience, even a truthful man will always be patient because he knows ultimately the truth will come out. Whereas Khan's attitude is enough to tell us that there's something he's hiding, and he wants to just play to the galleries and make commitments that are humanly not possible without considering the ground realities. Like if you remember when he was in power, that statement he gave that they found a big oil reservoir, and from tonight Pakistan's whole economic situation is going to change. So this is his mentality. You can call him a pathological liar, or he's become so used to do this, and his followers also have the same issue.
I want to move on also and talk about, of course, the Prime Minister's visit to China and, you know, its ramifications economically also, and its key highlights and what it means for Pakistan. We have with us Dr. Usman Chohan. Ji, Usman Saab, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Ji, Usman, there is, you know, we've of course spoken about economy from time to time. In your opinion, when you look at this visit particularly, how do you look at it with regard to its goals, economic goals, and, you know, of course, the delegation overall, and what its main focus is going to be?
First of all, thank you for having me on your show. It's always a supreme pleasure of mine. As far as the Prime Minister's visit to China goes, I think there's an important symbolism behind it at three levels. The first level is that it symbolizes a whole of government approach and commitment to reinvigorating the Pakistan-China relationship. A huge contingent has gone from Pakistan to Shenzhen and Beijing, etc. It's quite a significant thing. It's not just, in fact, government, but the private sector also has a contingent to signal to the Chinese that we're all here to reconnect. And not that we've ever lost the connection, but we want to give it new strength from peak to peak, you might say. The second symbolism is that this visit is being treated as so important that our budget is actually being passed 2 days further out. It's a little bit of an inconvenience for me as an economist, but I understand that it's very, very important, and it gives a very good signal that it is, in fact, very important for us to expend the full length of our time in China and look at all possibilities and present very meaningful options for investment, for reconnection, people to people.
You mentioned that there is, you know, of course, renewing our relationship. We've also seen unfortunate attacks that have happened, the terrorism that has come from Afghanistan, at its impact overall. And this, do you think that this visit is also in that sense a reassurance?
It isn't necessarily a reassurance because I don't believe that the Chinese people, the Chinese government, was severely affected in any way. Because what I mean to say is that they are very resolute and very committed to Pakistan. These types of things will happen because we are living in a complicated world, and I believe the Chinese understood that. So they didn't necessarily need reassurance because they have a very large commitment, a sincere one, to us as we have to them. So yes, these hiccups, they're unpleasant, they're hurtful, it leaves a bad taste, but we're all in this together. Dealing with the scourge of terrorism, and Afghanistan is a problematic country for 4 decades. It's not a particular surprise. So I don't think it needed reassurance per se.
Okay, but overall, as far as this, so then, the second part of it is, of course, the economy and what it can mean for Pakistan. And of course, the fact that the Chinese have pledged, like you said, an unprecedented amount of support in Pakistan and CPEC. So how do you look at CPEC in that light?
This is an excellent question because CPEC has various stages. The first phase of CPEC was completed successfully, but it was a fairly simple thing, a simple affair in the sense that it was infrastructure, pure infrastructure to set the bedrock of this project. Phase 2, however, is more complicated because it has a human element to it far larger. It requires initiative from private sector, public sector. It requires rearranging and reconfiguring parts of Pakistan in the sense of having special economic zones as well as routes activating. So it's a new step, more complicated and more important than just mere infrastructure. So at this stage, CPEC needs this push. We really need to get it activated, and that actually does require a careful human touch, more so than just assigning engineers to build stuff.
Right, fair enough. And as far as the diplomatic and the cooperation between Pakistan and China is concerned, do you think that, with regard to the region particularly and the changes here, of course, we're looking at the elections, from across the border, the hostility that is invariably there in the shape of, India, the region itself. Do you think that it's going to be, perhaps a cause of reflection, or that's also something that's going to be on the agenda?
It always has been. Not that I'm an expert on geopolitics, but certainly something that Pakistan and China have in common is a concern about how India is evolving as a society, and the fact that you have this Hindutva mindset sticking there. Of course, it's gotten a bit of a nudge from the voters, but it's still there. And the persecution of Muslims, I don't expect to stop by any measure. In addition, China has interests in South Asia that are beyond Pakistan. For example, they're involved in Bangladesh in a significant way, as well as Myanmar, as well as Sri Lanka. Those are also becoming areas of competition, is a mild way to put it. But for example, Bangladesh has been between a rock and a hard place lately. And so the Chinese-Indian relationship, the Pakistan-India relationship, and the Chinese-Pakistan relationship all have their own unique dynamics with a strong economic bent, but also various other facets that are going to face tensions propagated by the persistence of the BJP in a new government formation. To some degree, we know that the government isn't formed yet, but to some degree it certainly will be there seething or simmering in their system of power.
As far as the business delegation overall is concerned, pursuant to our investment goals, in terms of tangible, returns from this trip, how do you look at it?
That's a very important point you're raising, because going there and signing MOUs is the easy part. But taking the whole of government as well as the private sector to China means that the commitment was there, and then the second part of that commitment will be to put these things into practice when everybody comes back home. And that's actually when the homework will have to be done. Of course, the budget will be on people's minds, the IMF will be on people's minds, but all the takeaways from this important, multifaceted, multi-city, multi-institutional visit have to be put down and then put into place. So I think this government's approach is very intelligent in this way. Pakistan is now going to take all these stakeholders, has taken them there, and now is bringing them, when they come back, going to say, okay, now who has to do what? Now that we have all this on the table, let's get this into practice. I think that's very good in terms of implementation. So I expect the second phase, once people return, to then get things going for phase 2 of CPEC.
Right, fair enough. Thank you so much, Dr. Usman. It's always very nice to have you, and your answers are always very informative. Thank you for joining us. Aniq Sahab, as far as this visit is concerned, do you think that, like Usman here said, it seems to be about bringing tangibles back home for the Prime Minister, particularly, and his team?
Yes, obviously, as we are aware that we have been hearing a lot about phase 2 of CPEC. Phase 1, as everyone knows, was about infrastructure. Phase 2 is about utilizing that infrastructure to generate enough economic activity that the cost of infrastructure can be paid back, right? And obviously, that means and that will generate employment, that will generate export surpluses, and all that kind of stuff. And for that, the original concept was that many industries which were no more viable in China, because in China now the cost of labor is quite high. So those industries should be brought in here in the industrial zones and established here, and from here export of those Chinese products can continue. That is one of the major sector that we have to work on. Then obviously, as is always with all the visits of Pakistani dignitaries to China, not all things are announced in one go.
Yes.
You will continue to see different developments and announcements over time in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks. And there are issues of rollover of loans, rescheduling of some of the loans of the previous CPEC projects, and all that kind of stuff. That has to come in for us to sort of stabilize our external account position. Those are very, very necessary at this time. Then we are hearing that some of the Pakistani businessmen, particularly in mobile technology and fintech and some other sectors, e-bike manufacturing, are there in the delegation, and there are some commitments from their Chinese business partners that they will be willing to invest in Pakistan in these sectors. E-bike, for example, does not look that thrilling, but we must know that about 50% of our hydrocarbon fuel usage is through bikes.
So
and we are developing surplus electricity production. So if we can shift that electricity production to our transport sector, we can resolve lot many issues. Similarly, mobile export, mobile manufacturing in Pakistan, and from here meeting the local demand and exporting from Pakistan can be another sector which can be very promising for Pakistan.
Let me go to Shakil Rame Saab. Shakil Saab, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Shakil Saab, we're talking about the Pakistan and China visit of the Prime Minister and his delegation. Do you think it's going to be, how promising, first of all, do you expect this visit to be?
I think it was needed in the backdrop of what was happening in the last 2 years. So we were expecting some acceleration in our investment, but we could not get. So it will help Prime Minister and his team to understand what things need to be done so that can bring more investment from China, not only from China, from other countries also. But if we look at that, the two main, I think there are the two main expectations. If it will be met, it will be good for Pakistan. Number one, so we are looking forward to roll over reschedule our debt. That is very important because in the next 2 months, Pakistan have to pay around $10 billion. And if you look at our foreign reserves, that is less than 10 billion. So it is very important if Pakistan can get roll over on debt. That will also give us some opportunity as space to make independent decisions from the funds of IMF. Otherwise, IMF will be on your neck and will make sure that they dictate us to make the changes in the policy. And second expectation is the ML1. So we are expecting, but both governments will sign some agreement because we are hearing a lot of about MLUs and feasibility studies. The feasibility study has been completed. So let's hope it will also be signed during his visit. And we're quite hopeful. It's two of these things. And third thing is, that's what you are talking with your other guests, investment opportunities from the private sector. Prime Minister has addressed 1,000 businessmen from China. The delegation also have a big number of business community. We have to see what type of the business community has gone with the Prime Minister. Either they are looking to go for the assembling facility in the Pakistan, like to assemble, to bring some technology and assemble the product, and don't go for the manufacturing in the Pakistan. If we are still sticking to the assembling activities, that will be not a good opportunity. I think we have to go beyond that assembling. We have to move towards the manufacturing of different products, either it's a mobile, electric vehicle, or it's a vehicle. So we have to move towards the manufacturing processes. Third and last thing, I think all these people have expectations, but there are two fundamental things which we have to ensure then these investments can come in the Pakistan. First, security. Chinese are not ready to compromise, or you can say they have any space on security. And keep in mind, they have barely lost of their human beings and their nationals. They are also always saying that it's a Pakistan. If it has been happening in any country of the world, China has been given a very strong message. So second, that is the business environment. We have to take some concrete steps to change the business environment. We are talking a lot, but on the ground, the things are not changing. For example, it's SIFC we created. That is an excellent idea. I think we must appreciate what has been come out. But the structure of SIFC, it will make sure that it don't deliver. It will not deliver. Because it's only a facilitation center. It does not have any decision-making or implementation power. Number one. Number two, it is being, you can find all the bureaucrats are sitting there. There is a dearth of the experts, economic planners, who can tell you what to do and how to do. Prominent example of my argument is that when the Prime Minister Shehbaz was talking about after the SRC meeting, he said, I spoke to Saudi Arabia because he visited Saudi Arabia 2 times. He told Saudi Arabia wants to invest billions of dollars, but they told the Prime Minister that they don't have any bankable feasibility study. So in the last almost 2 years, so SIFC could not produce some bankable feasibility study. This is not I'm saying. This is a word of the Prime Minister of Pakistan. So in this context, we need
as far as Shakil Saab, as far as the efforts at this time to bring investment into Pakistan is concerned, this is one of those landmark visits that's expected to bring that, it's expected to make that kind of change. It's supposed to be a groundbreaker in that regard. Isn't that true?
I think we are expecting, and I'm telling you, Chinese businessmen are ready to bring billions of dollars in Pakistan. Why? Because their government has given them very clear instruction, Pakistan must be the priority. But the problem is our ground reality. Until unless we are not changing that, we cannot talk about this, we will bring in more. Maybe we have a lot of MOUs, but agreements at this point of time, I don't think.
And I think that there is a realization, as far as the government is concerned, that they have to make, of course, that Pakistan has to move towards making those kind of changes that will make that kind of inflow of investment easier. Towards making that kind of changes that are going to facilitate this kind of investment, that are going to make that investment easier for Pakistan. Let's hope that we can move towards that change, and of course this visit is an effort to garner that kind of investment. Of course, private partnership between people to people contact, and of course business to business contact, those seem to be on the agenda largely. Thank you so much, Shakil Rahman Saab. Thank you for your very valuable input. Thank you, Ji Aniq Saab. We're running out of time. Ji.
As Shakil Saab was saying, that it is important that Chinese concerns are also addressed, and I think Pakistan government and its institutions are quite cognizant of that fact. And their concerns about the security should be addressed.
And those are, of course, a priority for Pakistan.
Those are a priority for Pakistan,
Yes.
and these are not only about Chinese. Obviously, we also have to create a better security situation for our own businesses.
And
for
our
own
security
economy,
is extremely
for our own
important
people's
for us, of course.
security. So this has to
It has
to
to,
be
of course.
addressed on a immediate basis.
And we have also taken it up, of course.
We have, yes.
I think the fact that the army chief accompanied the delegation, it's enough to tell the commitment that the Pakistani state has towards the security.
And what the expectation, of course, is that we will be seeing tangible results.
Definitely.
Thank you so much for being with us. Unfortunately, that's all the time that we have. Aniq Zafar Saab, thank you for your time. Barrister Talha Khawaja, thank you for joining us. Daniyal Sheikh, thank you for being with us. Dr. Usman Chohan, thank you for joining us. Shakil Rami Saab, thank you for being with us today. Overall, of course, this is a very landmark visit as far as the Prime Minister and his delegation is concerned. There's extreme seriousness and the effort is to bring back tangible results as far as investment into Pakistan is concerned. We're also looking at private businessmen accompanying, being a part of this delegation. There's expected to be business-to-business contact. There's expected to be public-private partnership model. There's a variety of ways in which Pakistan is trying, and of course the effort is to bring investment into Pakistan, to facilitate investment, and to make Pakistan, of course, investment friendly overall. Let's hope that we can do that. Let's hope that we can see the kind of results that we are hoping for. Thank you so much for joining us today on Perspective.